Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Very good day, goeiedag, molweni, and welcome to Life Matters. Today is a very special episode as we delve into the heart-wrenching and often disturbing reality of Palestine's children caught in the midst of conflict and occupation. For decades, as we know, the Palestinian people have faced unimaginable challenges, from being removed from their birthplace, their homes, being displaced, to destruction of infrastructure, and now genocide. Joining me to unpack this conversation is Dr. Yusuf Lalkhen, an expert in child psychology who has dedicated a lot of time in creating awareness and understanding the impact of war on the Palestinian children's education and well-being. Join us as we revisit the devastating impact in a previous show that we did of Palestine's genocidal war on children's education. Expert Dr. Yusuf Lalkhen will share his insights on the psychological toll of war on the Palestinian youth. We will also examine the devastating impact of genocide in Palestine on children's education and their well-being, but also highlight the critical issues of loss, grief, amongst other mental health conditions. We will explore this complex issue. Now let's welcome back our guest on Life Matters. Assalamu alaikum and shukran so much for joining us online, Dr. Yusuf Lalkhen.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shukran for having me back.
Only a pleasure. Jazakallah for your time. Let's start addressing. Let's start addressing on how does prolonged war affect children's psychological development. Let's start there on their psychological development. How does it affect them?
Sure. So I think, Gouwah, we need to look at the idea of prolonged sort of war and conflict. Either we can look at it from the period October 2023 to October 2024, which is indeed a prolonged period, or we can actually go back much further and say that the people of Gaza, as well as the children, obviously, have endured a prolonged conflict going way back to about 2005. And then over that period until now, they've endured several major onslaughts over that time. In fact, in 2008, we had the Operation Cast Lead. 2012, we had the Pillar of Defense. In 2014, we have Protective Edge. And of course, in 2023, we had the recent onslaught. And in between that time frames that I've just mentioned, there were several onslaughts where the Israeli army referred to it as mowing the lawn. And the intention, of course, is to not just to destroy and to kill, but to psychologically unsettle the inhabitants of the Gaza Strip. So clearly our children in that period have over many, many years endured terrible conflicts, have been exposed to extreme violence, and have lost people, close family and friends and so on over that period of time. In fact, when you look at the average 18-year-old in Gaza at the moment, they have already endured 4 major conflicts in their lifespan. The average 14-year-old would have endured at least 3 major conflicts, and the average 10-year-old have endured at least 2 major conflicts. So clearly, when you subject children to an ongoing violence of that kind, you will find clearly extreme symptoms of anxiety and depression and post-traumatic stress. Children are exposed on a regular basis to family and members and neighbors being killed around them. And so there's no question about the impact of that kind of violence on children's psychological well-being. Of course, the conflict in the last year has been unlike anything we've ever seen before.
Yeah.
The extent of the brutality, the intensity of the attacks, and the whole scale of what has been happening in Gaza is unimaginable. And so one could almost conclude that the psychological impact is to some extent almost unimaginable in itself.
Yeah.
And it's almost like nothing we can say can come close to what it is that people have endured. And, and we get these statistics that comes through. And just today, another statistic that just reminded us about what the children of Gaza goes through every day. It is estimated that the Israelis use explosive weapons and hit civilian infrastructure, meaning residential blocks, um, hospitals, schools, and humanitarian distribution centers once every 3 hours
Sure.
in every 24-hour day. Once every 3 hours, bombing takes place in Gaza. And so, it is almost unimaginable the level of psychological toll it takes on the residents of that very, very small strip of land.
What are the possible diagnoses that could come up with these symptoms that are being displayed, what is being experienced? And I know, one can't, as you said, it's imaginable the emotional toll that it does take on them, living in fear, constant threat of violence, constantly being feared of being killed at any time, as you mentioned, every 3 hours, which means they don't even get to sleep. So let's talk about some of the diagnoses that does come up for them.
Yeah. So the diagnosis would almost be similar as I have explained the last time we chatted. It was already in June 2022, and that was before the recent onslaught. Already, organizations working in the area, like Save the Children, had estimated that more than 80% of the children had reported perpetual fear, constant worry, sadness, and grief. That's 80% of the population. And you can imagine in the last year, that figure must have come up to about 100%. Clearly, there's not a single person that can escape the state of fear, the worry, the sadness, and the grief. At that time, and again, we're talking about pre-2023, 75%, that's a large number of children were already bedwetting, were already exhibiting sort of selective mutism, a refusal to speak as a result of the trauma they were facing. And of course, anxiety and stress and so on. And what is worrying, clearly, when you have that large-scale psychological trauma, is the possibility of suicide. And we've seen all the videos where 10-year-olds want to die because living is so unbearable. And so when you see 10-year-olds showing the tendency for suicide, for just leaving this world, it is obviously an extremely worrying situation in that part of the world.
So, Dr. Lalkhen, could you describe the difference, if there is any? What would have happened possibly if there was the difference between short and long-term effects of occupation on children's mental health? So they were just exposed to this type of fear, this constant threat, maybe for 5 years. But now it's a year now that the world is watching. But of course, it has been there longer. So let's talk about the difference between short and long-term effects on occupation for children's mental health.
Yeah. Occupation, by its definition, is long-term. I mean, that's the reality. It was never intended to be short-term. It was always going to be a long-term occupation with the intention of complete displacement. So in this case, I think what we've had maybe, and that is what you're alluding to, is the possibility of periods of pause, of violence, periods of retreat in terms of the suppression of the Palestinians. And clearly when that happens, people utilize that opportunity to gather themselves. And we have seen Palestinians constantly over many, many decades, when they have the opportunity, they pull themselves together, they start rebuilding immediately. In fact, even in this period, in the last year, you've seen amazing examples of people starting little farms in the midst of the war in order to feed people around them. So they do have an amazing resilience and utilizing opportunities to help each other. And so with short-term breaks in between, clearly people have shown the willingness to gather together and be supportive of each other in many different ways.
Yeah.
But by definition, like I said, occupation is a violent act. It is a long-term suppression of people's rights. It's an ongoing destruction of people's property. It's an ongoing displacement of population that has been going on, as you rightly pointed out, for decades.
Yeah, Dr. Lalkhen, I want to touch on the whole idea of suicide, because we look at these videos of children wanting to become martyrs and shaheeds. What differences is that between wanting to die? After the short break, we continue our conversation as we acknowledge the emotional struggles of Palestinian children. It's crucial that we recognize their strength, their resilience, given to them by the Almighty as well within the complexity of this genocide. It's also essential to remember the human costs, the cost of life, of their lives. Palestinian children are not just statistics. They are the future of their nation. After the break, we will look deeper into the impact on education in a genocidal region. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is Life Matters. Now, education is a fundamental right to everyone, to all. Yet for Palestinian children, it's a luxury at the moment, often disrupted by bombing, destruction, and moving camps and homes. Schools are destroyed, teachers are scarce, and resources are limited. How exactly do children learn in such an environment? Dr. Lalkhen's expertise has shed light on the psychological effects of war on children. And now we look at the loss of education in their lives. Dr. Lalkhen, before we touch on how children cope with this aspect, let's look at the question before the break. You've mentioned the fact that there's suicide. What is the difference between a child wanting to say they want to be a shaheed, they want to be a martyr, they want to die in this cause, and being suicidal?
Yeah, I think that's a very important point that you made, Gouwah. I think there are distinctions between accepting death and seeking death. And I think the people of Palestine in Gaza, the Palestinians in Gaza, are well acquainted with death. They understand that that is an inevitable path that they walk every day when they leave home, even when they're in their house. So there's the inevitability of death and the acceptance of death is one thing, and one can understand that. And children do understand, and I think they've been taught that if that does happen, then clearly you are considered to be a shaheed, a martyr. What we're talking about is something slightly different, and that is when children begin to wish to die.
Okay.
Not in the context of martyrdom, but purely in the context of escaping the horrors of the life that they live in that area. And so that's a slightly different sort of aspect to the notion of suicide and martyrdom.
Okay.
But I think it's an interesting point, nevertheless, that you've raised, and one that I think deserves some more exploration.
Thank you, Dr. Lalkhen, for that video, that explanation, rather, because often when we see the videos of these children, when they are wishing to die, it's in the context of them over their loved one, someone that has just passed away. And when you say the conviction of shaheed and martyrdom, it's when they are this strong-willed young individual fighting for the cause. So definitely something that we need to differentiate. Yeah. Please now provide us with the context on the educational landscape in Gaza for the Palestinian children pre-genocide.
Yeah, I think very often when we talk about education, we kind of, and in the context of what's happening, we talk about the impact of war on education. I think we should really be, first of all, say, what is the impact of education on the people of Gaza? Highly valued. extremely educated. In fact, the literacy levels in Gaza exceeds the literacy levels in America and exceeds the literacy levels in Israel itself. So they attach a very high premium to the idea of seeking education and improving oneself via education. And for them, education is not just a means to fulfill your ambitions, but education has become a form of psychosocial support for people. So being involved in schools, being part of education, provides them with a tremendous sense of well-being and purpose in life. And it's exactly that, Gouwah, that the Israelis have recognized over many years already, but more pronouncedly so over the last year. And, recently I've been looking at the concept that I think is just one of many that new things that emerges from the state of war in Gaza. And that is the idea of scholasticide. Um, I, I've seen it a couple of times, and I've revisited it a few times as well, just to kind of get a sense of what that really means. But in essence, it is a deliberate and systematic destruction of the education system in Gaza. Now, that's a frightening thing when you think about it, in terms of the value that Palestinians attach to education and the efforts they have made over many, many years to equip themselves and improve themselves. And some of the most brilliant minds are, in fact, in Gaza. But secondly, like I've indicated, the psychosocial dimension of the education system in Gaza has been extremely beneficial to the emotional well-being of young people. So when you start systematically destroying that, you take away much more than simply a building. You take away almost the heart of the people and the children of Gaza. And so when you look at what has happened in the last 12 months, and the statistics are all over the place, but we sometimes have to just revisit some of that to get a real sense of what's really been happening. So right now, this is going to be the second year that 650,000 children will have had no opportunity to attend a school as they used to, as we know it. So the statistics show that 85% of all schools have been completely destroyed or damaged. In fact, the statistics indicate an actual number, and that is 473 schools have been destroyed in the last 12 months. If you look at that figure, then what it boils down is that the Israelis have destroyed 40 schools every month in the last 12 months. Now, that's a deliberate act of genocide. That's a deliberate act to undermine the growth of the people when you start targeting their educational institutions. 10,500 university and school children have been killed. Again, when you look at that number, what it translates to would be 30 learners every single day. Just to get a sense of what we are talking about. And if you really want to understand that, it would simply mean that if you have a class of 30 children, a class of children is destroyed every single day. A complete class with everybody in them. That's the extent of the scholasticide that has been taking place. 500 teachers and lecturers have died, of them 95 professors. What I have observed, and I'm sure many others as well, that they have systematically targeted the most talented, skilled educators in Gaza. The head of the departments, the director of the institutions. They bombed 12,000 universities and destroyed them completely. So the consequences is devastating. And, unless something urgent is done to stop what is happening, and some program is put into place very similar to the Marshall Plan that was put into place for Europe after the Second World War. It's going to take literally decades to recover what we have lost in the last few months.
So we understand that they are moving it on, and whenever they are, they'll make a place for salah, they'll make a place to teach the children, they'll make a place to survive. And some of them also have made a place for makeshift schools and possibly had some technology, available to them. How does this makeshift schools, Hafi schools, I've seen some, as an alternative education program fed, what role does technology play in bridging this educational gap? And also, possibly children with disabilities, knowing that the war has left kids with loss of limbs, left them disabled. Is that inclusivity allowed, with these makeshift schools that is an alternative for them now?
So you raised an amazing point, and you're absolutely correct. Because I think when we hear these statistics, your heart sinks. You can't imagine yourselves being able to cope in that kind of environment. And what is encouraging has always been about the people of Palestine is the ability to rise above their circumstances and to innovate and to create opportunities. So you're absolutely correct. I think those makeshift schools in tents that they have established, people have offered their services. The quality of the service is less important. I think the fact that they come together and make the effort to restore some semblance of education is what is noteworthy. Because again, from a psychological point of view, that is what we are looking for, not necessarily the actual quality of the service that is rendered. So first of all, I think it's a boost to the morale of the people in Gaza when those makeshift schools open up and children flock to them and teachers are willing to offer their services with limited resources. They have made in Gaza an amazing use of technology that they have available to them. And so, of course, that was one of the reasons why the Israelis targeted the services, the electricity in that particular area to limit it. But they have found ways to use the technology to provide access to services that otherwise would not be available. Gaza has always been inclusive. There is no other way you can live in an area that's small, but to accommodate everybody. And so while the rest of the world struggles to include diversity and disabilities, for the people of Gaza, it has to be the only way in which they can survive is by including everyone. And they do recognize, I think, all the time that if you see to the least of us, you see to all of us. And I think that almost plays out in everything that they do. And so people with disabilities have always been accommodated. However, and again, the pressure that has been put on these services in the last year has been significant. Gaza currently have the largest amount of children amputees in the world. And that's a shocking statistic again. And yet you see video after video of children with crutches and in wheelchairs moving around in very difficult circumstances. We struggle with mobility and access for people with disabilities in a highly developed country. And yet in Gaza, you see provision being made by people to accommodate kids with disabilities. So truly an amazing thing to observe.
Thank you, Dr. Lalkhen, for that insight. Yet, despite these challenges, Palestinian children continue to strive for knowledge, and yet their emotional well-being has been crushed. Stay with us as we continue to explore the psychological toll of war in our next segment and possible solutions. Don't forget to WhatsApp us and DM us on our social pages as well. And for anybody that likes to watch the show right now, please do so via our live stream on hilaal.tv. Back in a moment. Welcome back. Assalamu alaikum. A very good day to you. This is Life Matters, and whether you look at it as a health or parenting topic, it's really about how life matters. In this context, Palestinians' lives and their children's matters. War leaves invisible scars on children's minds and bodies, trauma, and their hearts as well. Let's not talk about the trauma, the anxiety and depression, which are just a few consequences of living under this continuous occupation in Gaza. Today we shine a light on the unseen and the voiceless victims of genocide, the Palestinian children. Dr. Lalkhen joins us online, an educational psychologist who has taken the time to do some extensive evidence-based research to present to us today and chat about this topic. Let's continue this insightful conversation with him. Online, Dr. Lalkhen, let's look at how does one, as us as individuals, how do we stay hopeful despite the fact that we are exposed to these atrocities every day? It's literally in our phones, and I've heard of some conversations where women especially say that I don't even look at the messages that I receive. I don't open up the video. I even had a chat with Dr. Naledi Pando, and she says, I can't see these messages. I can't see these videos. What message would you like to convey to our audience? And yet these people are standing up. They're going to the marches. They're voicing them. Besides the fact that they are doing that, what message would you like to convey to our audience, possibly around Palestinian children? From the news article recently I've read on Relief Web, Israel kills 100 children daily in Gaza since October the 7th last year. If I do my maths right, that's about 4 to 5 children every hour. And I think while doing the show, at least 4 children have been murdered in Palestine. How does one stay hopeful with all of this? What initiatives or programs have shown that is possibly promising in supporting Palestinian children and that we can get involved in?
Yeah. It has been an extremely difficult time, Gouwah, and you're right. Just this week, I received 2 messages from friends of mine, and I'd like to read it because it kind of echoes the sentiment that you've referred to, that many of us go through, myself included. And the person said to me, the ongoing genocide is making inroads into our mental health. Someone said to her, this person, she cannot go on holiday or spend money on things. She's just haunted and traumatized by the suffering in Gaza. I personally, she said, have to monitor my exposure to clips on Gaza. One needs to know that I suffer from anxiety, irritation, disturbed sleep, awful dreams. There's also suppressed rage and angst and frustration and anger about witnessing the unthinkable. Somebody else said to me in the same week, many of us have sustained sadness over this long year, and feeling like our hearts are tired. Our faith and our strength is increased by witnessing their resilience. And then she added something which I think is what I want to chat about. She said, similar to seeds that adapt under very difficult circumstances over a significant period of time, so too have the Palestinians. And that's quite, for me, watching all of this and talking about all of this and being so far and feeling helpless in the face is the fact that we cannot afford to fall into despair. And that's the thing. We owe it to the Palestinians, I think, to cultivate something of what they refer to as sumut. It's a very remarkable concept that has emerged over many years. And loosely translated, I think, sumut is about perseverance, it's about steadfastness, it's about resilience, it's about working together with each other, where the collective is more important than the individual. It is almost a mental state and a form of action. As you've indicated when we spoke about the makeshift tents that go up and the farming that takes place in the midst of the rubble. That is the expression of this concept of sumut. Now, for people in Cape Town who don't understand truly what that word means, we have an equivalence of sumut in Cape Town, and it is something that we've cultivated in our history of slavery and oppression and apartheid. And so we know what that feeling is. We just haven't articulated it maybe in the way that the Palestinians have. But in Cape Town, we call it standvastigheid. When you stand your ground and you are rooted in the earth and you know who you are and you know what you want, you know how to get to where you want to be. That all constitutes sumud, and to some extent that constitutes what we refer to in Cape Town as a standvastigheid. And so we have this obligation to our brothers in Palestine, and I think all oppressed all over the world, and children who suffer all over the world, to be standvastig on the principles of justice and righteousness. You know, if we do that, then we are able to contribute in a very, very significant way.
I think some words you just can't translate, and I think one of them is standvastigheid and analexia. I came across that one as well. I don't know how to translate analexia.
What is the word for what?
When you feel that deep down sorrow. Yeah. And you say
it's a deep sense of humanity.
Yeah.
It's a deep sense of
it touches you so deep. Yeah. Exactly. And analek just does it for me. I wanna look at some of the acts of like you say, let's not give up hope. Some of acts of empowerment to protect the Palestinian children's future. We would like to be part of protecting their rights, to take a step forward. We know of some Palestinian kids that are actually coming to South Africa. Some of them had come to Johannesburg for some medical care that the Raslo private hospital in Alhamdulillah in Pretoria has accommodated them for. And I spoke to some of them. I spoke to the one dad as well. Alhamdulillah, he was able to speak English. And there was this resilience that, that's where we're from, that's where we come from, and that's what we are. But I don't see any hope for my children. So he, as much as he can, he wants to stay in South Africa. And I believe there are some more Palestinian children also visiting Cape Town for that matter. I received a message and they're sending out all these broadcasts. Can you donate? We want to put them in a home. So what can we do as South Africans that are welcoming Palestinian children and their families to our midst in our community?
Yeah, I think we should do what we've always done, Gouwah, and that is open our hearts and our homes and show the kind of hospitality that we've always shown to travelers, to people coming to our shores, to refugees, to new arrivals. We've always shown that sort of side to us, to be welcoming in that sense. And I think, when the call is made, as it often is, for any form of help, then we should rally to that call and provide whatever we can. It's really a case from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. And right now, the need is for us supporting the Palestinian children as they arrive on our shores. But I want to add, maybe an additional level of support that can be very powerful. So in addition to us marching as we should, in addition to us posting and sharing the message, extremely valuable. You never know who's going to watch your status. You never know who's going to look at your Facebook page and your Instagram, and the message will resonate with them. So we need to continue with that. But I think more important now than ever before is BDS. The boycott, divestment, and sanctions is a call that I think we need to take very, very seriously, because it's a small but yes, hugely significant way in which we can support the cause of the Palestinians. So whether we're in the medical field or the legal field or the educational field, be sure that we make sure that that there is a boycott of the Israelis in all spheres of life. So the message gets across to them that what they are doing and the state that they have established is unacceptable to the rest of humanity.
Yeah, absolutely. I came in contact with a Boera auntie, an African, very religious Christian, telling me how many products they boycott because of what's happening in Palestine. Every action counts, as Dr. Lalkhen says. We must act now to ensure Palestinians' children, and this is their future of today. The future of today is brighter than their past of yesterday. The children of Palestine are the seeds of hope. We want to hear and continue hearing these stories for a better future. Education, as we know, is the key to unlocking the potential of the Palestinians' next generation. So let's be part of it. We'll summarize some key takeaways and resources for our audience. Support systems are vital. Let's stand together as a community, encouraging others to these conversations. Spread the word. BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction. More just after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Assalamu alaikum. A very good day to you. Molweni, Goeie Mora, Goeie Dag, wherever you are in the world, across the lands and over the beautiful seas. Tell everybody to watch shows like this. Spread the word. Let us be accomplices for each other of support in this time of need, for emotions, for acting up, informing each other what list that you need to put up so people can boycott. Shopping at L'Oreal, and this person didn't even know that is a product you need to boycott. They outrightly stand against the Palestinians. They support genocide. They support this Israeli atrocities. So remember the names and keep the list up, that we know who to. We have the economy as well in our hands, so we can lead the way. So BDS is the way to go, as Dr. Lalkhen and everybody. I also recommend that and push it in my family, my community. You be that word as well. War does not discriminate. It destroys equally, unfortunately. And remember, the Palestinian children's future are at stake. Palestine is at stake. The future of Palestine is at stake. It's time to put the needs of Palestinians' children above politics, conflict, and war. So let's look at the situation on going ahead and learning to be part of humanitarian crisis. I did want to just touch on something academically, Dr. Lalkhen, if we could just go back a little bit and understand the impact of education when it comes to the children's academic performance. Let's look at the consequences of disrupted education on a child's future. So like you said, it's the second year ongoing now. What consequence does come about because of this disruption of education for the child and their future?
Sure. I think the closest we can get to appreciating what that means is by considering our own conditions during COVID. I have in my practice, it's 2024, 2 years later, 3 years later, and those 2 years of COVID had impacted so significantly on particularly children who were already vulnerable. So, this war is 1,000 times more serious and more traumatic than the period of COVID. So if you can compare the two, you can get a sense of the impact. We have children currently, who have stopped talking since the COVID period. We have children who have refused to socially engage with others. We have children who have developed OCD tendencies in terms of washing and cleaning since the time of COVID. So you can imagine the disruption and the extent of that disruption in Gaza. And I'm particularly worried about the ages between, I suppose, 1 and 5, 1 and 6. That period is the period where maximum growth and development has taken place. And we know that almost unfortunately, that is the group that has been most significantly targeted. We have children born without parents. We have children who lose parents in their first year. And so the damage is significant. And I think the consequences, is dreadful. And it's something that I think we need to closely monitor going forward. And I think people have already recognized the need to intervene and support the Palestinian children in that particular age group.
Let's look at the role of humanitarian organizations in any area. I mean, Islamic Relief, just to mention a few, doesn't just go out to Palestine and other parts of Africa, but if there's a flood in Durban, for instance, they're there. The academic performance for future prospects on Palestinian children, how can educators, people within that sphere, actually help aid work through humanitarian groups when it does come to the children's performance and, you know, their possible future careers, and looking at whether it is the ages of 1 to 5 or 5 to 9 when their subconscious is more aware and grasp, but also the youth, them having a gap. And we know Hafiz students, sometimes they leave high school for a couple of years, they do their hit and they come back. What impact or any stage of, you know, the child's academic year does it actually have with regards to future career prospects?
No, you're absolutely correct. I mean, I highlighted a particular age group, but you're absolutely correct. I think every single age group has its particular challenges, and we need to be aware of that and to be aware of what the impact of the wars had on them. And you're right, for example, if you look at an adolescent who's been away from school for 2 years, may feel reluctant to go back and pursue education further. And similarly with your intermediate age group, they may go back but would be less motivated. And again, those who have completed these studies may have a lack of interest or opportunity to pursue tertiary education. So each age group, I think you're right, has its particular challenges. So in terms of support and aid, you know, we're almost in a place where we have to feed the children before we think of their education. We've got to house the children before we think of education. It's almost like a step back, that certain things have to be put into place first before we can even imagine an optimum level of service in terms of education. So, you know, the various organizations that have always worked in Gaza hopefully will continue to do what they've done before. And I'm hoping that new organizations will enter the space and provide primarily the essentials so that we can begin to establish a road, a hospital, a school, a home, food, electricity, and along with that, hopefully begin to establish the education system accordingly.
With those essential needs that you know, needs to be addressed immediately, are there ways of educating children or implementing a subtle prospect of growth academically within the feeding schemes, within distributing of water? Can something academically be implemented when doing those type of actions?
Yeah, no, I think you raised another interesting point, and of course that none of these services need to be running separately from each other. And if there's a more integrated approach, then it's possible to introduce education at the same time. As you know, when we look at that time here in COVID, when we couldn't go to school, we went online. And so I would imagine that if, for example, in Gaza, the internet is established and electricity is established, that one can clearly use technology to begin to establish a more coherent education system that can be made available almost immediately, rather than to postpone it until such time that the other elements are in place. So a kind of integrated approach, I think, would ensure that we don't neglect education beyond what is necessary.
Absolutely. Dr. Lalkhen, we have to wrap up. I just want you to leave us with some concluding comments on how education plays a role in rebuilding and making any reconciliation efforts, you know, for us to start with or to push our governments.
Yeah. So, you know, our government is doing an amazing job in addressing the realities of what is happening in Gaza. For the first time ever, there is an international law recognition that what is happening in Gaza is an atrocity, is a war crime, and certain people need to be held accountable. I think that in itself is an amazing contribution towards restoring the education system and providing for the needs of children in the country. So I think at that level, we're doing an amazing job in not only doing that, but rallying other countries around the cause as well. You could see increasingly more and more people are joining the South Africans in their court case. And when they do that, we anticipate that those very countries will then also contribute to the reconstruction and development of Gaza in the future, and particularly, those essential services that are necessary for children.
Absolutely. Remember to spread the word. If you have international friends, family, I have a daughter that attended a school. Remember, she said most of her friends are not even from here. So when she used to post stuff, they in fact asked her questions now. What is this? What's going on? And now there's support of Palestine. So remember that Palestinians' children are not just victims. They're part of the next future leaders, innovators, and change makers. So by understanding their struggles and supporting their education, we can create a brighter tomorrow, not just for ourselves to stable the whole thing and our emotions, but also of what's going on their side of the world. Thank you, shukran, jazakumullah khair, Dr. Yusuf Lalkhen, for your time once again and this very insightful conversation. All the best till we chat again. Assalamu alaikum. And thank you for joining us on this episode of The Reality of Children, for children, the Palestinian children, without school and genocide on their doorsteps. A shukran to Dr. Yusuf Lalkhen for sharing his wisdom, expertise, and doing the necessary research on this topic. And thank you for continuing to speak about the voiceless, for the voiceless. We would hope to speak to him again soon, inshallah, on topics affecting children and their mental states. Remember that the children of Palestine is everybody's story. It is one of resilience, hope, and determination. Their future is in our hands and the hands of our next generation. So keep talking. Let's ensure it's one of peace, prosperity, and one where we will not stop talking about Palestine. We will continue to amplify the voices of Palestinian children until their rights are recognized. Let's continue these types of conversation and foster a supportive community in this context. Don't forget to subscribe to all our shows for more enlightening conversations. And remember, awareness, supports, education are key to understanding what's happening, the genocide in Palestine. Join us next time for more enlightening shows. Until then, stay informed and stay holistically healthy, mind, body, and soul. From the rest of the Life Matters team here in Johannesburg studios, wassalamu alaikum and goodbye.